In this video, I'm going to show you how to knock off a simple t-shirt so you can make something really, really cute, just lightning fast. I did the neckband in a way I've never done before, and I really love it. So let me show you how. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Catherine Sews. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know what? We're all in mourning over the loss or the apparent loss of the 4 big pattern companies. It seems that their parent company has been bought out by a liquidator, and that is just never good news. It really feels for a lot of us like the end of an era or the final death knell. But no, we are going to persevere and we're going to keep making our own wardrobes because we love it, and we'll find other ways. And so today I want to focus on a couple different ways of getting patterns. So first of all, we really do need to support those small independent pattern companies. It's really easy to go online and search up PDF pattern for whatever kind of specific thing you're looking for. You can find so many different PDF patterns. Some of them are free, but you know what? Those pattern creators deserve to get paid for their work as well. So I'm always happy to support those independent pattern makers. This top, I made a video on this one not too long ago. This is the Adrian top from the Friday Pattern Company. I still love it. I made it in this fabric and in a darker butterfly print, and I love them both. But today I wanted to just make a simple t-shirt to go with a skirt that I have planned coming up. And so I looked around and I did find just the perfect little simple t-shirt. So I want to give you the option of using this pattern. It's just called Easy T-shirt from a company called Wardrobe by Me. I've never used their patterns, but it looks really, really nice and dead easy. When it is a very simple shape like that, it is kind of the perfect time to do a knockoff, which is our next best way of making a pattern. So I think that's what I'll do today. I will make a knockoff based on this top that I made years ago out of a digital print. Isn't that just so interesting? I love this. It has a long asymmetrical hem, which I haven't worn out for a long time. I've just been tucking it in because that's kind of a little dated, but I still just love that fabric. So I do wear this one quite a bit. And I think that when I made this one originally, I probably did knock off a similar shaped garment. So it's just such a dead easy shape. There's no separate sleeve. It's just basically a front and a back. But the problem is that this is a woven material, and the fabric I'm going to be making my t-shirt in is this beautiful bamboo print, and it's lovely and soft. It's got a nice weight to it. So I do want to caution you that when you are doing a knockoff, it's kind of a no-no doing what I'm doing, to take something that is a woven, knocking it off in a knit. I will definitely be fine going in this direction from a woven to a knit. It's not going to end up being too small because this fabric is super stretchy. Really, where you would run into trouble is if you tried to knock off a knit t-shirt into a woven fabric. That woven fabric just will never provide you with enough stretch to go over your head, over your shoulders. That's really the problematic direction to go in. You can't knock off a knit onto a woven fabric unless you make a lot of accommodations. It's just not a great way to go. But with this direction, knocking off a loose, simple shape onto a t-shirt knit, the worst thing that's going to happen is that I'll have to do some taking in. It might just end up being too roomy, too stretchy, too overwhelming. If that sounds good to you, then let's jump in. I'm going to first of all trace this onto paper because it's such a good simple shape. I think it is the kind of thing I would probably like to make again and again. So I'll trace it onto paper. If it was a one-off and I was just doing it the one time, I would trace it directly onto the fabric. Let me show you how. I'll just trace it onto paper and then I'll have that pattern for future projects as well. So let's get busy. Okay, so I've got my machines threaded, ready to go. I think this is going to be a quick one. I'm starting at 4:20. I'm hoping to be done by 6. We'll see how that goes. I'm also in this video going to try the neckband in a different way. This is my normal way. I'm going to try a technique where the neckband gets kind of wrapped over, and I think it's a nice, neat looking technique, but I've just never done it, so I'm going to try it on this. Alrighty, so to do this knockoff, I've got the shirt in half, nicely lined up, side seams together, shoulder seams together. And because this fabric is so silky and slippery, I'm going to actually pin a few points together so that I know I've really got it lined up nicely. I bought this fabric in panels, so it was printed in these panels. I just thought it was so beautiful, but it is on its last legs because the threads catch on things and then it makes these pulls, and So it's definitely on its way out, but I do love it. The length that I want is equal to this shorter edge, but I might drop it down in the front. So I've got this laid out on wide gift wrap. I actually thrifted this roll of gift wrap, so that is kind of nice. So I would normally trace this with a pencil, but I want you to be able to see, so I'll use a Sharpie. And I'll also be using my two favorite rulers, my see-through ruler and the Variform hip curve. And these are both linked in the description. And then again, because it's so slippery, I'll just put a few weights down just to hold it in place for me. The last thing I'll need, and I'm going to use it sparingly, is this sharp tracing wheel. And there's also a link to this in the description. Normally it does not damage fabric, but because you can see this fabric has already got so many pulls in it, I'm going to use it really sparingly. It's here if I need it, but hopefully I don't even need it. So for the most part, I am just tracing around, leaving a little bit of seam allowance, like basically a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And same on the hem, I don't really need much more than a 1/4 inch. And I'm going to want this to come down maybe to there. So here on this edge, I would normally use the pointed tracing wheel. I'm just afraid that it's going to make little holes. Yep, it did. Okay, never mind that. Alrighty, so now here at the seam line, I want to mark that, but also add on seam allowance. So I can basically just, do that outside edge there. A little seam allowance along the shoulder seam. And I'm doing this rough and then I'm going to clean it up. So that's where the front neck wants to come down to there. And my center front is here. And then the back neck is coming to here. So the back neck is there, and I would normally use that pointed tracing wheel right along that edge, but there's no way I'm going to do it on this fabric anymore. I want to get a little bit more wear out of my favorite top if I can. So this can all go, and we're looking not too bad. So that's it for the knockoff. Like, that's fast, right? When you have such a simple shape. Sorry, one more ruler is a nice long meter stick just to get that good center edge. Now, I'm going to cut this out twice. I'll cut it out on a double layer fabric at that higher neck, and then I'll trim down one layer to be that lower neck. So I just want to smooth out my lines. I definitely want right angles at both edges of the neckline. And then this one, I'm going to rough it in since I don't have a line there. That looks probably fine. There, that'll be good. And then the shoulder seam has a little bit of a curve to it. And so does this armhole seam, just a slight curve. And of course this does too. So I can see my little dots from the pointed tracing wheel there. That is going to do just fine. Okay, before I cut it out, I'm going to fold my paper so that I get a front and a back. And then I'm going to staple those edges together, but my staples need to be outside of my drawn line. And I start my stapling from the fold and work my way out. And now I can cut. So I'm only cutting on the upper neck, the back neck right now. And so now I can cut off the front neck. All right, so now these pieces are both going to be cut on fold. Good, we're ready to cut, just like that. That was about 15 minutes. It's 4:35. And here's my pretty fabric. I think that print is so pretty. So this is just over a meter of fabric, but I could have definitely got it out of a meter or even a yard. Like basically you just need the length of the t-shirt that you want, as long as you can fit your front and back side by side on your fabric. So I'm making two folds, like these are the two salvages, I'm bringing them to the center so that I have two folds, one for the front and one for the back. And you know what I'm going to do, because I am trying to get this done and show you how quickly you can do things like this, I'm going to bring my two folds together. There we go. So I'll cut them out in the exact same way I cut out the paper. I'm going to cut them both out with the high neck and then cut one down with the lower neck. So that cuts my cutting time in half. There you go. Rotary cutter. And then I'll need a neckband here and maybe sleeve bands. Those bands absolutely have to go this way on the fabric, right? I cannot cut them lengthwise because they just won't do the job properly. They have to have the full stretch of the knit. So that's that. How nice. And so I'll take away the paper and the top one and then cut down the neck for the front. I'm going to lay this one down right side up. And this one right side down onto it, and then clip the two shoulder seams and the two side seams. So I've got a good kind of ivory color in the serger, and I have my sewing machine threaded with a soft yellow, and I tested out my machine needle. I think I've kind of lost track, but I think it's a universal needle in there. So I tried it out on a scrap and just made sure that the needles didn't leave any permanent holes. I sewed a little bit and then pulled the thread out and then made sure that the holes disappeared. So that's either a universal or it's a ballpoint, but either one will do. And then the two sides as well. When you're pinning or clipping, never just start at one end and make your way down, especially on a fabric that has so much give and play as this knit does. Just kind of do both ends and make your way to the center. I didn't give myself any notches at all. That's fine on a small thing like this. But otherwise you would match up corners and notches. And like basically you pin all of your matching points and then pin in between. So my only matching points are the corners. And then I'm going to take this straight to the serger, serge those 4 seams, try it on, probably do some fitting, and then just do my neckband, armbands, and hem. And that's it. Alrighty, this is the front side facing up. I just like to have the front up so that when I look at the seam, I know which is the front and back, so I can press my seams toward the back just by looking at the serging. So again, that's a fussy little detail, but it helps me. And yep, this is a 4-thread serge, just a normal stitch, regular, like the differential feet is at 1, stitch length is at 3, so it's all like the standard settings for your 4-thread serge. And then I can just feed in the next seam. This is now the shoulder seam. And I just keep an eye on both layers. I want to be able to see both layers there, like both edges, so that I don't end up missing an edge. And feed in the next shoulder seam. And the second side seam. That's it. And then just separate those all out. And now I can try it on. So as always, I put it on inside out to try it on, and it's pretty good. I kind of like the little sleeve. I'm happy with the neck. It's just a little bit roomy here, right? Because it was made for a woven fabric. So I'm just gonna pin out a line. And when you do that, having it inside out makes it so much easier, but you wanna pin out a line that shows you where to sew, where to taper it in and out, and you want to have all the information before you take it off. Sometimes my students will just put one pin and say, I want to take it in that much, but then you just don't know where you're tapering in and out. So this one I'm taking right down to the bottom and tapering out at the sleeve. That'll be nice. If you have a fuller bust, you might at this point want to do a dart, which is a whole other kettle of fish. So I think that'll be good. It's not tight, it's just body skimming and just a little bit less pajama-y looking. So that's going to be good. I'll fold it in half now and just make sure I'm taking the 2 sides in the same amount. And then I'm also going to make that correction to the pattern. And then I better make a note on the pattern that this is now intended for a knit. Alrighty, so I'm going to just taper it out at that sleeve. And then I think both are coming in the same amount here. That seems good. Alrighty, and this is where my pointed tracing wheel can come in really handy. If I just go through here, and I'll just go a little, like I'll give myself a little bit of seam allowance out past my dots. Not too much though, because otherwise I'm not going to be really making much of a difference at all. Those two can go back together. I'm going to clean up that line before I staple them back together. And again, my staples have to go outside the cutting line. Okay, serge again, try out again. Here we go. Okay, I'll give it another try now. Okay, what a nice difference, right? It just is trimmer. Like it wasn't a huge difference, but it's just trim and so much nicer. It feels better, it looks better. That took 5 minutes and that was so worth it. So the body just fits great now. I'm really happy with that. And now I'm going to do the armbands first because I'm going to do them in the way that I normally do all the bands. So this is sort of straightforward. When I cut a neckband, I cut it 75% of the circumference because it has to stretch around the neck. Not so much with the armband. I cut it a little closer to the finished edge here because it's not going around this way, if you kind of get what I mean. Alrighty, so this opening here is 6.5, so 13 inches. I'll cut it 12. So it's like just a little bit less, not a big deal. Remember, I cannot cut these going lengthwise on the knit. So if you've kind of lost track of your selvages, then you have to look for the little lines of the knit. Can you see here when I stretch it? I see those lines. I know I need to go perpendicular to those lines. So here we go. I'm going to go right across this bottom edge. And I just want a piece that's 2 inches wide. And what did I say? 13 inches, right? 2 of them. When you're cutting little strips like this, straight cutting is so important. That is one point I'm always trying to drill into my students that, yeah, it matters. It has to be really nice and straight. So this line looks pretty straight, right? It's not bad, but no, it's not straight enough. We want straighter. So here we go. Just a good edge there. And then put my 2-inch line on there. And then I'm going to cut it off at 13 inches long. Good. So now I'm going to take those 2 bands and I'm just going to serge that little seam first, and then I'll take it to the iron. If you don't have a serger, everything I've done so far, you can just do with a regular machine. Maybe use a long stretched out zigzag so you have some stretch built into your stitches. These go to the iron now, and I'm just going to press that little serged seam flat. And then in half with the good side out. And this part you want to be pretty accurate with as well. Get those edges together because that makes the next step so much easier. Like if they're not together, you boss them around and get them together. On a bigger thing like a neckband, you kind of do one little section at a time. But on this little small piece, I kind of have to get it all organized before I can get that iron on it. Oh, and don't stretch these. That's when your knit is really going to curl up on you. So you can see I'm handling them gently. I have not stretched it at all because you pay such a big price. Good. Awesome. I've got the shirt still inside out. The little bands are going to go in. Folded edge goes in first. And the seam of the band goes to the side seam, not the shoulder seam. You want it kind of hidden. And just about 4 pins around, and then I'm just going to serge that on. Okay, so I like to push my seam allowances to the back, and I can see that this is the good side of the serging. Can you see the difference? That's the bad side of the serging, and this is the good side. So I know I serged front up, so I know this is the front, pushing the seam allowance to the back. That's just another fussy detail that just makes, I don't know, it makes your work better. All right, let's go serge those on. So now I'm starting and stopping at the side seam again, so it's a little bit more hidden. And I'm going to trim off all of my serger tails as I go on this one. And And another thing about accuracy here is that I don't want to cut off really anything. I just want to be going right beside that edge so that I'm really consistent. If I cut and wobble a skinny little thing like this, if it's a tiny bit skinnier in places, it really shows. So you really want to try to just be accurate and go right along your edge. These serger tails can just be cut because I've overlapped where I've started, so that is just fine. That looks nice. Cute, right? On a serge like this, I like to have the good side facing up. And kind of for the same reason, just so I can have that good side of the serger showing. It's just a little bit nicer. That's cute. Okay, final press for that. So this I want to press with the little serged seam going in toward the body. And that is it. Now I get to try that neckband that I've never tried before. Okay, so to cut the neckband now, I want to figure out 75% of this neck. And so I put the two shoulder seams together. And so this is the front, this is the back. So this is 50% of the neck. So I try to keep the math really simple because it is not my strength. And so 50% is, let's call that 13 inches. So I want to add half as much again to get my 75%. So 13, half of that is 6.5. So that puts me at 19.5. Okay, so I want a piece that's 19.5 inches long. I could add a 1/2 inch for seam allowance, so I could call it 20. And then instead of just my regular 2-inch wide piece, I'm going to go 2.5 inches wide. And cut it off at 20. So same start, just serging those edges together. I'll be right back. I'm just going to do that. So quick little serge there. And now I want to quarter mark this. So that seam will be my center back. Oh, and I'm not folding it in half the way I did before. I'm going to keep it just flat, but I'm going to mark, well, you know what? I might do it with notches. So you can quarter mark with a pen, but I'm going to want to see it on the right side. And so I'm just going to put tiny notches. So there's my center front. I'll mark both sides. Center front is there. And then if I put those two together, my little notches with my seam, then I can mark the halfway points here and there and over here. And those halfway points are not the shoulder seams. They don't match up with the shoulder seams because the neck is so much lower at the front. So I want to match the shoulder seams together just to find the center front and center back. There, center front. Your notches have to be tiny, otherwise you're going to end up with a hole. So it is safer to use a friction pen or something like that. Okay, and then I'll bring those two notches together. And so you see how far ahead of the shoulder seam my halfway point is. And that's just because the front neck is lower. Okay, how fun. So now I'm going to put that center back seam, I'm going to put that right to my center back notch and clip. And I'm putting right sides together. And this is not going to get serged on, so I will cut my serger tails now because they are irritating. Probably irritating to watch too. So a clip there at the center back and clip at the halfway points, clip at the center front and the next halfway point. So each section of the neckband is only 75% of the section it's sewing to. It has to stretch, and that's what we want. I make mine evenly distributed all the way around. Truth be told, you do want more of the stretch in the front, but this works just fine, and it's so much easier than figuring all that out. So I'm going to be stretching as I serge. No, not serging. In this technique, I'm going to be sewing it at the 15 line or 5/8 line, and then I'm going to wrap it around and sew it again, and then I'll trim off the excess. I think it'll be fun to try. Okay. So I've just flipped the shirt to be inside out again so that the smaller piece, the neckband, is on the inside of the circle. That's easier than having the smaller piece on the outside. Okay, and then starting at the center back, nice and straight at my 15 line or 5/8 line. And I have to give a little bit of a stretch as I go just to make the two layers sort of fall in together. So if this technique works nicely, then it's brilliant for somebody that does not have a serger. So by stretching it a little bit as I sew, then it has the ability to stretch after I've sewn. Right? Because you're sewing it in that stretched out position. Makes sense, right? At the shoulder seam here, I want to make sure I've got the good side of the serging facing out, and then I'll show you why that ends up being nice. So having that good side of the serging facing up there, and I know I did it at the sleeve band too, right? So then this shoulder seam, the whole seam is going towards the back. It's not twisting, it's just laying flat. So that is a nice little way of just being able to tell your front and back as you're going. So that's it, front up, good side up, that's it. Okay, pretty good. So now the idea, this is just going to wrap around. My friend Sabina, who was on the Italy trip, recommended this. I hope I'm doing it the way she said. So we should see. I could either sew up here on this edge or in the ditch. And I think I might just go for the ditch. That seems good. So if I just do a nice little wrap, and this is definitely one of those times where if it doesn't look good, don't sew it. Get a nice shape, get a nice little wrap, even Steven, and then I'm going to sew right here in the ditch. And I'm glad I started on the center back because that took a little, it's going to take a bit of practice. I did go up on the edge a little bit. And I don't want to do that. You're either going to sew on the edge or in the ditch, not going back and forth. So let's see if I can control myself a little bit better and just stay in that ditch. I like it. I'm not going to say that that is beginner friendly. The way I did the sleeves is easier for sure, but I think I'm going to like this and it's fun to try something different. You could definitely pin all of this before you jump right into the deep end like I'm doing. I'm being a little impulsive, but it's actually not bad to organize as you go. It seems like it's working fine. Okay, I'm going to give that a little bit of a press and make sure I like the look of it. And then there is a lot of excess here to trim off. So I would have been fine with my 2-inch strip, but I think it definitely, it wasn't hard. It was pretty good. So can you see how it lands when I put it down? The excess just flips right up. And so I'm going to press it that way because I think it'll make it easier for me to trim the excess if it's kind of going up, I think. I don't know. But before I trim that excess, I'm going to try it on and make sure I'm 100% happy. So yeah, it's great. Super great. So I'm going to trim off that excess. I kind of like that it's coming up instead of down toward the body. I'm just slipping the blade of my scissor in between the layers there and snip around. That's just fine, right? If you have a cover stitcher, you could just go right over that. That would look really great, but I do not. That's nice. It feels nice. And it's not going to, you won't have seam allowance flipping up and around. That's just great. I really like that technique. Yay. Thank you, Sabina. I love it. Alrighty, my friend, it's 5:37. I just need to do a hem here. Let's serge that. Tuck in my serging so that it stays going toward the back. I can see the good side, so I know that's the back. Okay, a little bit of a hem. So I'll turn up maybe twice the amount of the serging. On a curved hem like this, you don't want to get too big. It gets harder the bigger your hem is. But if I turn twice the amount of the serging, then I can more or less run the edge of my presser foot along that fold. There's no need to pin or measure this kind of hem before you go. Just organize as you go. If it doesn't look good, don't sew it. Okay, final press. Let's go. My friend Judy gave me this starch-free smoothing spray. Let's try it. So just with a light touch with the iron, just to sort of smooth it down, kind of condense it in a little bit. And then Bob is your uncle. And guess what? I want it to be done by 6 o'clock, right? Here we are, 5:45. Yay, that's pretty good. Alrighty, so that included making the pattern. So now that I have the pattern, I'll be able to whip up a t-shirt like this in like no time. That is awesome. I can't wait to show you. Okay, so what do you think? That was pretty straightforward, right? Pretty quick. I'm really happy. Now I've got the pattern and I'll be able to do it lightning fast. I love this neck treatment. It's sort of snappy and feels really solid. I like that there's no edge of seam allowance that's going to fold up after it's been washed a couple of times. It's just super simple and straightforward and easy. So for summer, I'll be able to whip up a whole bunch of these and using less than a meter of fabric and probably less than an hour of time. So whether you use a pattern by an independent company like Wardrobe by Me, or you do a knockoff of a simple shape, you can still make your own wardrobe and do it really nicely and really quickly. Alrighty, so that's it for this week, and until next time on Catherine Sews, you take care.
Step 1, wake up early, gonna rise with the sun. Step 2, get some good, some food in you. Step 3, think real hard about what you wanna be. Step 4, everybody just do your thing.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day.